Okay, so we are continuing our discussion on dividing polynomials, and I'm going to show you two examples. The first example is x to the fifth divided by x to the third. Now, before we divide this, let's recall in an earlier video, I showed you the inverse property of multiplication. Barely fit in there, but that's multiplication. And it said that x, a number x, any number x, divided by itself reduces and gives us 1. Now this is true as long as x does not equal 0, because we cannot divide by 0. But I can reduce a fraction if I have the same number on top and bottom and reduce it to a 1. And remember, 1 times any number is itself. It's the same value. So if we rewrite this saying x times x times x times x times x, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 x's, that's x to the fifth, and we divide that by x times x times x, that's 1, 2, 3 x's, that's x to the third, we can reduce using the inverse property of multiplication. Here's an x, that reduces to a 1. These reduce to a 1, and these reduce to a 1. So I'm left with x times x, which equals x squared. Now that's one way of doing it, but what if the numbers were 23 over 17? It would not make sense to write that many x's and then just cross off every pair. So another way to do this, a more efficient way to do this, is to subtract the powers, subtract the exponents. So I would instead, here's the alternate way to do this, I would say x to the power of 5, that's the numerator, that's the exponent in the numerator, and then we would subtract the exponent in the denominator, which is 3. And then we would have x to the 5 minus 3 is 2. And look at that, we get the same solution. So I would prefer you do it the second method, where you subtract the exponents. So let's move on to example 2. Feel free to pause at this moment so that you can write down any notes. So example 2. We're going to make it just a little more difficult. Example 2 is 6 x to the fourth, y to the second. We're going to divide that by 2 x y to the second. Now, let's divide the numbers first. 6 divided by 2. Well, that's just 3. Now, to divide the x's, I have powers right here. The power of the numerator for x is 4. The power in the denominator for x, well, we don't see 1, but it's understood to be a 1 right here. So let me just mark a 1. So now we can use the previous method that we used, where we have the variable x, and then we start with the power in the numerator, 4, and we subtract the power in the denominator, 1. When I get to the y's, I have y to the second and y to the second. That's the same thing. That goes back to the inverse property of multiplication. These reduce. They become 1, and 1 times any number is the same thing. So it's it's just going to be whatever's left over here, which is going to be 3x, and then 4 minus 1 is 3. So the solution here is 3x to the third.